guys, this is Backdraft and welcome to another Redstone showcase. In this video, I'm going to show you my original design for a Simon Says game made using the new 1.17 Sculk Sensor. Before we get started, I just wanted to say I am currently in snapshot 20W51A. If any major changes occur to any of the blocks that I use in this snapshot, I will release updates to this design. If you're not familiar with how the new Sculk Sensor is supposed to work, here is the 30-second crash course. The Sculk Sensor is a new redstone block that will wirelessly detect things that happen in the world around it. So for example, if I walk back and forth, you can see that the Sculk Sensor activates. I can jump up and down, I can cast a fishing rod or reel it back in, I can shoot a bow, I can place a block. All of these actions are picked up by the Sculk Sensor. If you place a Redstone Comparator next to a Sculk Sensor, all of these actions release different signal strengths. So for example, if I walk, that is a signal strength of 1. If I shoot a bow, that is a signal strength of 7. And if I jump up and down, that is a signal strength of 5. Wool blocks can be used to stop signals from going to a Sculk Sensor. So for example, if I jump up and down right here, you'll see that the Sculk Sensor activates. But if I walk behind these wool blocks and do all kinds of stuff, jump up and down, walk back and forth, place blocks down, the Sculk Sensor is not activating. So using these new features of the Sculk Sensor, I came up with the idea for a Simon Says minigame. In this game, the player is tasked with performing actions. If they perform an action correctly, they will get a point. If they don't perform an action in time or perform the wrong action, then they will lose the game. The game will continuously go so long as the player performs the correct action. The actions that the player could be asked to perform are the following. Open up the chest above the Sculk Sensor, push the button in front of the Sculk Sensor, jump up and down, shoot your bow, or cast your fishing rod. Each of these actions has a corresponding colored shulker box. For example, the red shulker box means open chest, the white shulker box means jump up and down. All of these shulker boxes will appear randomly in front of the player right here. So once you have your bow and your fishing rod handy, you stand right here on top of this target block and push the button to start. Once the game starts, you won't be able to move. The shulker boxes will appear in front of you and then you have to perform the actions. So white was jump up and down and I get a point for that. Magenta is cast a fishing rod and you only have a few seconds to perform each. Green is push the button. Green is push the button again. You can get the same action twice in a row. It is completely random. Cast the fishing rod once again. And we'll do one more. Green, push the button. So the game will keep on going so long as I keep performing the correct action. If I perform the wrong action or don't perform any action at all in time, like right here, you'll hear a little jingle and you will lose the game. Once the game ends, your points will appear in this chest right here, represented by amethyst crystals. So in this case, I got 9 points. That means I did 9 actions correctly. A few side notes about some of these actions, such as casting the fishing rod. The cast of the fishing rod is what the Sculk Sensor is listening for. Reeling it back in is a completely different action, so it's up to the player to make sure that they cast the rod and reel it back in before the Sculk Sensor deactivates. For opening the chest, the opening of the chest is what the Sculk Sensor is listening for, so they need to make sure they close it before the Sculk Sensor deactivates once again. So the idea here would be to open it and then quickly close it before the Sculk Sensor has a chance to detect the closing. Pushing the button, the Sculk Sensor is listening for the push down. The push up of the button happens before the Sculk Sensor has a chance to release, so nothing to worry about there. And then finally, the jump is actually when the player lands on the ground, so the player has to make sure that they jump in time for the Sculk Sensor to register that action. There are 3 different game modes I had in mind for this mini game. The first one is what I just showed you, which is just plain old Simon Says, where a single player will have some time to perform each actions and will keep going so long as they keep performing the right ones. The second game mode is what is called Gauntlet. In the Gauntlet, you'll have an ample amount of time at the start to perform each action, but as the game goes on, it will get faster and faster and you'll have less time to perform those actions. And the third and final one is head-to-head, where you can line up a bunch of Simon Says games next to each other, put a bunch of players down at each of them, and have them compete until the last man standing is declared the winner. Now for the redstone. So I've stripped away the aesthetics and we are left now with just the redstone. So the first piece that I want to go over is this dispenser right here that spits out the shulker boxes. So these shulker boxes actually have items inside of them. If we take a look at this red shulker box, you can see that it's filled up to all but one empty slot. This red shulker box, when a comparator is next to it, will emit a signal strength of 14. Now this red shulker box actually represents opening up the chest. Opening the chest will give the Sculk Sensor a signal strength of 15. So what we're doing is we're feeding 14 on the side, which is 15 minus 1. So essentially the Sculk Sensor, when we have this comparator behind it in subtract mode, will emit a signal strength of 1 when the red shulker box is next to it and you open up the chest. So when the game is turned on, this piston right here will be extended, pushing this block to be directly in front of this comparator, which is taking the signal from the Sculk Sensor. So when we have that signal strength of 1 emitted, this repeater down here will be activated, which will deactivate this torch, letting this torch activate, which will then give us a ding indicating that we have done the action correctly. And that signal will be carried over here to this dropper, which is what dispenses the amethyst crystal shards for the points system. If the wrong action is performed, then this comparator right here will either emit a signal strength of 0 or a signal strength that is greater than 1. If the signal strength is greater than 1, then this piece of redstone will be activated, which will pass through this target block right here and activate this repeater right here. So if this repeater is active and this repeater is active, then the torch will not activate. For each of the other shulker boxes, they all also have a specific number of items in them corresponding to the action that they represent. For example, the orange one will give a signal strength of 6, because the signal strength emitted from a Sculk Sensor for firing your bow, which is what orange represents, is a signal strength of 7. So upon firing your bow with the orange shulker box next to the Sculk Sensor, you'll get a signal strength of 1 out of the Sculk Sensor's comparator behind it. For magenta, the signal strength for casting your fishing rod is 14, so this shulker box has a signal strength of 13 once again. So every shulker box, when the action is performed correctly that it corresponds to, the Sculk Sensor will emit a signal strength of 1, and the correct action will be registered with the system. This piece right here, directly behind the dispenser and piston, is the clock that controls the game and the time you have to perform each action. So in this hopper right here, we have 5 items. This will give us about 2.5 seconds to perform each action. So essentially, as the items go back and forth in this clock, this block will be active and then this block will be active. So when this block activates, the dispenser will dispense a shulker box, then you'll have about 2.5 seconds. Then this block will activate and the piston will fire off, breaking the shulker box. Up above the clock, we have what I call the loser detector. So when the piston fires off, the system has to check to see if the user performed the action correctly. So what will happen is when a shulker box is dispensed, this piece of redstone will deactivate and this one will activate. That will fire off this observer right here. So this observer will shoot this piston out, which will push this block right here, and it will also activate this piston right here through this observer that will shoot off this block over here. So when the system is waiting for the player to perform an action, these blocks are right here and right here. If the action is performed correctly, this torch will activate, which will activate these rails. That will be picked up by this detector right here, observer, and this piston will push the block back over there. Now, if the user did not perform the action correctly, this block will stay over here, and when the redstone switches back over here, this observer will fire again, which will activate this observer over here, which will power this block, power this piece of redstone, power this block as well, and shoot this redstone line on. It'll play the little "you lose" jingle, activate this piston, which will push this piece of redstone block next to the clock, which will stop the clock and stop the game. So when the game is on, this redstone block is actually retracted by this piston, which is controlled by the start button right here. So I'll now turn the game on and leave it on so we can see exactly what's happening. So as you can see, the dispenser just dispensed a shulker box. The redstone line went back and forth. You actually heard the lose jingle there because we actually lost. So as you can see, as this redstone goes back and forth, the dispenser will dispense the shulker box, the piston will fire off, and then all of this actually works out as well. So as you can see right here, these two pistons are firing off simultaneously to start off the, I guess, round or whatever you want to call it, and when the player is expected to perform an action. If the action is performed correctly, this stone block will be pushed back and the game will continue on. If I manually just push this block back over here, you'll see that we actually will not lose and the game will continue on. I'll now simulate an action being performed correctly. All I have to do is smack away this rail to fire off this observer over here. So you can see every time the action isn't performed correctly, we get the you lose jingle. Now right here, it's expecting the action, it's not performed, so you lose. We're expecting the action, I smack away the rail, and we actually don't lose because I performed the action correctly. You saw that that piston actually pushed the block back over there. That indicated that the action was performed correctly and the game will continue. So this is the you lose line. You can see when the game is lost, it will activate, which will push this piston. And this piston will then grab that redstone block, which will be in front of it, and lock the clock. If the clock is locked, the game can't run. So I can actually simulate that right here by putting the block of redstone back right here. So you'll see once I lose, the block of redstone is pushed and the game shuts off. The final piece to look at is the collection system for the shulker boxes that will cycle them back into the dispenser. So when the shulker box is broken right here by the piston, it will immediately get sucked up by this hopper minecart right here. It'll then get fed into this hopper and fed into this dropper right here. And then this dropper is essentially the dropper elevator that we have that leads back up into the dispenser up top where the shulker boxes are. So any shulker boxes that end up in this dropper will be picked up by this comparator, which will fire off this observer clock right here, activating the dropper elevator, pushing them immediately back up into the dispenser. And it pushes them up there fast enough so that they can actually be dispensed again, so that you'll get the same action twice in a row. That is a possibility. So that's it for the regular mode of the game. I wanted to show you the redstone for the Gauntlet mode of the game. So we popped over to my redstone testing world for my current survival series, where I've built the prototype for just that. So essentially what we have here in this case is two separate clocks. The clock that controls the main dispenser and piston of the game, and a clock that will control when the game gets faster. So essentially, I'm not going to go into super nitty-gritty detail with this, but I'll just try to explain exactly what's going on here. So in this hopper right here, we have 11 items, meaning that to start the game, the player will have about 5.5 seconds to do each action. Now, as the game goes on, every about 30 seconds or so, the second clock will fire off, and that will depower this torch right here, which will allow an item to drop into this hopper right here. So every 30 seconds, you will lose one item, which means you'll have about a half a second less to do each action. Now, this second clock will be allowed to fire off a total of 6 times. That's controlled through this redstone memory cell right here. If you're curious how this redstone memory cell actually works, I have a video about my redstone memory cell combination lock. I'll link that at the top of the description so you guys can see how this is working. But essentially it says, once I have a total of 6 times that the second clock fires off, this line will activate, which will lock this repeater right here so that no more items can be dropped out. So the idea is to drop a total of 6 items out, so by the end, once the game is at its fastest, there'll be 5 items left and the player will have about 2.5 seconds to perform each action. When the game resets, this observer clock right here, which is underneath this dropper, will fire off about 8 times, allowing all 6 items to flow back into the main clock. Now there is one issue with this which I can't seem to work out, and that is if there is no item in this hopper at this split second that this torch deactivates, that means no item will drop through and the player could potentially end up with more than 5 items in the clock and more time to do their actions. I'm not sure how to get around to that. I've been scratching my head on this. This is a pretty good design, but it's not perfect. If you guys have any ideas, leave it down in the comments. Essentially what I'm trying to do is make a clock that will get faster every 30 seconds to a certain point and then stop getting faster. You guys are really smart, Redstone. I know there's a ton of you out there. Leave your comments down below. Help me out here. So that is it for this Redstone showcase. If you guys have any questions, comments, or critiques, please leave them down in the comments below. If you think I can improve this game or you think there's any potential issues, please also leave that in the comments below. If you like this video, please do not hesitate to hit that thumbs up. And if you're looking forward to future Redstone showcase videos like this one, then hit that subscribe button and the bell for notifications. I'm currently trying to get to 750 subscribers. We just passed 500, which was a really awesome milestone. So any help you guys can give me to keep growing is much, much appreciated. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys again. Take care. Bye-bye.